Hello, everybody. It's Kenneth from Global Renaissance, and on the line I have Scott Mandelker for our regular Scott Mandelker series. We are number 7, I do believe.
Yes.
Um, and from our last kind of show, our last kind of discussion, Scott, we were talking about Freud and Jung,
Mm,
and some of the psychoanalytical uh, mm, aspects that relate to what we've been discussing so far. Obviously the development of the self, or the human being
mm,
into something trans, as we're saying in that language, transpersonal.
right.
Mm. And I was asking you, so maybe let's just start the show with talking about your background and what you, because I do believe you have a degree in counseling.
Yeah, I have my BA is in Buddhist Studies and Psychology from
Mm.
Naropa Institute, Boulder, Colorado, 1987. Yeah, 87. That school was started by a Tibetan Lama, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, who died. And actually, he died while I was a student there, and so I remember the day very well. And it's basically uh, Buddhism, psychology, and Tibetan Vajrayana and art
Wow.
blended. So very creative and interesting.
Hmm.
So then I have a master's in counseling, psychology, integral counseling, and Ph.D. from CIIS,
Hmm.
California Institute of Integral Studies, San Francisco, in the late 80s and early 90s. So yeah, I have a lot of training,
What
but
is
it's not a university psychology program. It was all quite transpersonal
hmm.
uh, and integrative.
What does integral counseling mean?
Well, that's a term that CIIS uses um, in their own way. So California Institute of Integral Studies.
Hmm.
Integral actually traces back to the founder of CIIS, Mr. or Dr. Chaudhary, Indian man, who was a student of Sri Aurobindo, Indian sage or guru or teacher, writer. And I guess it's basically, typical integration of the mind body psychology, somatic psychology process,
Hmm.
and the higher potentials of a human being and spiritual questions, spiritual issues.
Hmm. Sounds very Ken Wilber almost.
Oh, yeah, sure. So we studied transpersonal psychology, and there was a contingent at the school that, were like devotees of Ken Wilber,
Hmm.
meaning they thought he was the cat's meow for transpersonal psychology.
Hmm. So give us a little definition there. What is transpersonal psychology?
Well, the question is, what is personal,
Hmm.
right? So in Greek, the word persona, I believe, means mask,
Hmm.
like a theater mask. So the person is a mask. The person is metaphysically mind, body, spirit complex, three energy fields with many subdivisions, seven chakras with subplanes and energy connections. Uh, a field of energy consciousness that has continuity of sense of self and patterns of mind.
Hmm.
So that's the self, the manifest self, more or less. Personal then focuses on mind body, actually, which is the five senses and intellect, the veiled mind or the conscious mind, and body.
Hmm.
And so personal is on developmental issues primarily, relation of the child to parents and the stages of normative psychophysical development from infancy onwards,
Hmm.
and major developmental tasks and how well they've been met or not met, and how that leads to psychological conflict or unhealth, neurotic, psychotic patterns of mind.
Hmm.
Now that's all. That's all. The transpersonal then basically gets into questions of our greater self, which is not only this one lifetime or not only body mind.
Hmm.
and it's obviously invisible, unprovable, non-empirical, non-scientific in a sense, scientifically um, determinable,
As yet,
but
though, by today's
as yet,
technology.
right, except, there are pioneers, many, many. So we have Kirlian photography.
Hmm.
You can see what appears to be auras or energy patterns interpenetrating physical form, like
Hmm.
leaves, things like that. You have Dr. Emoto, Japanese man who I met, who's a very nice guy
Hmm.
in Tokyo, who takes, high magnification photographs of water crystals after certain influence. Not only water in the reservoir and water in the sacred lake, but also water that you say love to and water that you cry at or scream on.
Hmm.
And checking to see the geometry, the quality of crystalline symmetry, the basically geometrics of the water molecule
Hmm.
upon the influence of mind. Do you know about that work?
Yeah, it's really fascinating.
Yeah,
I
he's
looked
for
at a
real.
bit. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, and actually, he's very much a good guy, and that group has also had some attack or some criticism from the mainstream science in Japan, which means they must be on the right track.
Hmm.
So that's interesting because it shows how states of mind influence the building block of matter, which is water,
Hmm.
actually, hydrogen and oxygen,
Hmm.
carbon-based system. So that molecules can be rearranged by mind is a big deal, and that's how magic is done, and that's how healing is done.
Hmm.
So, so that's one example. Another example of transpersonal aspect of our being. And then, I mean, I do counseling, so I've been doing counseling since '91, and it's transpersonal, more or less, not only for wanderers or metaphysics, but that's all included. So it wouldn't be only let's talk about your feelings towards your parents and how that manifests in your patterns of relationship today and your sense of self or self-esteem and therefore your health. Not only that, but let's consider why you chose your parents or
Hmm.
what do they manifest, what aspects of your unrecognized conscious do they manifest,
Hmm.
or um, what did you experience in meditation and why was that? What does it mean for you to have an experience where you had a deja vu or vision of the future or prophetic dream or some kind of bliss in meditation
Hmm.
or something, something unusual. And then how that relates to ultimately the higher levels of personal development. Similar to Abraham Maslow's scale of
Hmm.
self-realization. Forget the name.
Hierarchy of needs.
Yeah, hierarchy of needs. So, you know, that very much accords with the chakra development from 1 to 7,
Hmm.
from the
Yes.
base of the spine.
Hmm.
And Ra actually brought that up in saying that that we can understand ourselves better by analyzing our habitual seating of experience, seating, SCAT, how experience settles in us, how we settle experience in our mind, meaning through one of the 7 perspectives, or really a few of the 7 chakra perspectives. So in the first chakra, the concern is only survival, food, shelter, sex, body activity, health, life or death of the body, not much thinking, and lots of body focus. In the second chakra, the concern is my feeling about me and how it relates to me and my personal emotional process in the moment.
Hmm.
In the third chakra, there's a relation to other and group, society, and the bringing in of the intellect. So there's an expansion from the second chakra to inclusive awareness of others. And third chakra relates to third density, which is the place where souls make their choice of polarity, whether you're going to go with love or without love, as the guiding principle of your life, and how you meet experience, or how you meet the catalyst of life and develop yourself, whether you embrace love and truth and goodness for all, or you're seeking power and control for the separate self at any cost, and truth and kindness are unimportant. So that's where choice is made through density, and third chakra consciousness is very group and social related. And so that can be healthy or unhealthy, right? So some people are involved to help the world, some people are involved to control people and groups. Some people are very concerned about what other people are doing or not doing, very concerned about society, and then others are not. So there's a saying: the common the low level a low mind a low level mind is concerned with things. A middle level mind is concerned with people. A high level mind is concerned with ideas. And so once we get to the high level mind concerned with ideas, then we get to the higher chakra perspectives on meeting catalyst or meeting experience, how the seeding of experience in a awakened mind, where the concern is not only me and my feeling, or the group and my position, and my action in the group, but also a deeper understanding of my being here and greater significance. So in fourth chakra, the concern is care and kindness to all, self included. In the fifth chakra, the perspective is seeking understanding and truth and knowing and communication and creative interaction in a positive way, or negative, actually. And then sixth chakra is awareness of unity, or how we all are interrelated and dancing together, and the value of balance and will, and interdimensional awareness, actually. And then seven is, bliss enlightenment. So usually we focus at one or other level. And so the example Ra gave was somebody's at the checkout counter, or somebody's in the store in front of you, and they're delayed. One person curses them. The other person feels sorry for them because it looks like they can't find their change. The other person doesn't care at all, and another person feels well, regardless. So
because we're fixated on a certain level of thinking. Is that what?
Yes. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So the one who's angry is blocked second, third chakra. The one who's compassionate is developed in the fourth, or heart center. The one who's indifferent is generally fixed in the second center, because they're self-concerned and not interested in others' condition. And then the one who's may well be in a state of poise or balance, higher centers, 654. So that's transpersonal. And so in the healing process, or self-development process, you can go top-down and bottom-up. Those are two different approaches. So meditation is top-down, and psychology, especially even a body therapy, is bottom-up, right? You can see through it, or you can see it through.
You can see what? Sorry, I didn't catch the first one.
Yeah, you can see through it. If you can't see through it, you've got to see it through. This was a statement from my counseling supervisor at CIIS 20 years ago, a guy named Ray Vespi, V-E-S-P.
Wow.
Really good soul.
Wow, and that's profound, man.
Yes, that's a very high transpersonal awareness.
Yeah.
So if you can't see that your mind is like a dream, or thoughts and feelings are like, clouds that appear and dissolve, and thereby be detached and return to balance and open heart. If you can't do that now, then you have to see it through by understanding and accepting and dealing with the complexities of mind.
Wow. Actually, just to backtrack a little bit, I was watching a film with a bunch of friends, watching Conversations with God, actually. And this
Mm.
this movie was about Neil Donald Walsh, and he was he was going through many scenes which are he was a homeless man, and he was eating food from a rubbish dump,
Mm.
and a boy and a woman were watching him, and just it was so interesting to see how each of us in the group reacted, because
Mm.
me and another friend were having a really difficult time watching this thing, because you know I was empathizing. I don't know what she was doing. She must have been as like we were just feeling so, feeling all of that
Mm.
shame, and all of it was a
Yeah.
lot of shame, and
Yeah.
we both of us kept sighing at the same time. It's quite funny
Mm.
actually, and
Yeah.
the others seem a bit indifferent. So yeah, it's actually very interesting how it's actually very telling, isn't it? You can tell where a person is at given what happens to him. Observe his reactions, or his or her
Right.
reactions.
Right. Right. Any good counselor or trying to, natural doctor or guru or healer or teacher or helper, as well as the negatives, can read the person's mind by their reactions,
Hmm.
more or less.
Wow.
And I mean, a Chinese doctor could read your health just by the way you walk.
Hmm.
I mean, all these things, people spend many years studying gait and gesture
Hmm.
and eye direction, like in NLP. If you're looking upright, then you're thinking you're doing this, and if you're looking up left, that means something else.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, everything that a person manifests is shows their totality in microcosm.
Hmm.
And if you can get the right proportion in tracing back or expanding from the micro to the macro, meaning the greater aspect, from the small incident of their reaction to the source in terms of their personality, the basic patterns of mind,
Hmm.
uh, then you will know the great from the small.
Hmm.
It's like holography
Yeah.
or Russian nested dolls.
Yeah.
uh, So yeah,
Is
that's
it?
very helpful.
Hmm.
So you can understand yourself. Why did I have a strong reaction to his plight? At some level, you're projecting your own personal, for
Hmm.
sure.
Hmm.
Doesn't mean, it's wrong, but it's also a projection of your personal process. And so you could say, well, perhaps the issue of poverty or social censure and shaming, uh, and being isolated or outcast, being homeless and destitute, that has some significance for me.
Hmm. Yes.
So maybe you had a past life of something like that too.
Hmm.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if you were wealthy. I don't know if you've had many past lives, but it's not unusual that somebody's had both high wealth and great poverty in past lives. And
Hmm.
so you'll have certain sensitivity then to that.
Yeah, that makes sense, because you'd be in a sense exploring the dynamic of what it means to be abundant or not.
Yeah, yes, yes, absolutely. Or yes,
And
the
that's an overarching theme that is, I don't know, the development of the soul, or whatever you call it,
well,
through
yeah,
lifetimes.
yeah. Well, uh, there's a saying I think in the New Testament, and Jesus may have said it, or somebody, or maybe it's a paraphrase, something like, to he who has much, much shall be given, and to the one who has little, even that little shall be taken away. And in a way, that's the statement as to the person who has abundance of not wealth, but magnanimity, abundance in goodness, in virtue, actually.
Mm,
The person with abundant virtue will continue developing virtue.
Right. I
And,
see what you
and
mean.
the person who is rejecting virtue will lose further opportunity to develop virtue.
Hmm.
Their own meager virtue will be degraded as opportunities are withdrawn karmically, or as the life plays out.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because I always thought about it in the physical aspect of it.
Mm.
Now it makes complete sense if you're thinking of it in the level of the mind.
You see, the thing is that's interesting is that the physical is a level of the mind. It's the body level of mind.
Hmm.
Then there's the consciousness level of mind, and then there's the spirit level of mind. It's all in your mind. So Ra said, "You are dancing thoughts."
Wow.
So the body is body is not only a manifestation or analog of the mind. The body experience is a level of mind.
Hmm.
It is the mind experiencing itself as embodiment. The mind believing in the display of embodiment.
Hmm.
That's why the real yogi can walk through the walls, because he knows it's all mind made.
Hmm. Did you see any of this kind of activity in Naropa?
Of what activity? People walking through walls?
Yeah, like super normal things like levitation and
Um,
bursting with
uh,
flames, and I don't know what yogis do these days.
I saw, I had, I won't get into it, but I had some experience with adepts who do magic.
Hmm.
So it's very real.
Wow.
And so I haven't seen levitation. I've seen uh, incarnation into an animal form, a human person putting their mind into an animal form,
Wow.
and communication with entities non-physical
Yeah.
directly in the room, and direct manifestation of entities changing or making some arrangement of things in a room,
Hmm.
and materialization of a mind form in the form of a colored disc. This is actually a Buddhist meditation practice.
Hmm.
Um, but nobody walking through a wall. Not yet.
Right. Yeah.
Something to look forward to.
Wow. These are interesting things, but obviously not the core of what we're
Well, you see,
hoping to achieve.
people are focused on where they're stuck, and as they unstuck, then they can then awareness can expand to a broader perspective, or a higher level of seeing, or greater seeing. And so, mm, people who, when we're stuck in our personal psychology, the transpersonal is relatively unavailable and invisible. And so when there are significant blockages, second, third chakra, the person really doesn't understand the joy of unconditional love,
Hmm.
and they really don't understand the peace and clarity of wisdom. They
Hmm.
don't get, and they don't even recognize its value.
Hmm.
Generally, they're too stuck in self-referencing self-conflict.
Sure.
And so personal psychology is the resolution of self-generated self-conflict,
Hmm. I had.
with the healing of understanding and self-love.
Hmm. Reminds me of this. I've been watching the Alai videos. The guy who supposedly calls himself a Pleiadian on YouTube.
Oh yeah, yeah. The guy, he looks like he could be. So maybe he is. But yeah, I've heard of
He
that, or I've seen a
he
little.
he said something. He said, if it's vibrating higher than you, it's invisible to you, and that links in so well with
Yeah.
what we're talking about densities. It's like you're more dense, so therefore you don't see the less dense.
You should try to set up a three-way Skype talk. He and me and you. You can interview the two of us.
I would love to be in contact with him, although he
Well,
he doesn't
send.
he doesn't list his contact details. He says you have to tune into your higher self to get his contacts.
You can tune into your higher self and send him a YouTube message.
I,
See if
I
the higher
yeah,
YouTube is in with his higher self.
I think that, well, that's a I would love to. I would love to.
You know, I think that three ways or panel discussions are really useful.
Hmm.
Uh, there's a little bit of resistance in many teachers to stand on stage or in a forum with another teacher
Hmm.
because they may be shown up to be mistaken
Hmm.
or dogmatic or wrong. So, but it's very helpful for people to compare these views against those views, the proponents of different views. In the old days in India, um, in the time of the Buddha, there were many, many yogis and supposed, self-proclaimed gurus
Hmm.
and leaders of hundreds of students, actually. All guys living in the forest doing some particular practice.
Hmm.
And when their teachers met, they often had a dharma debate,
Hmm.
like who knows more.
Hmm.
And the loser had to go with all his students to become new students of the teacher who won the debate.
I
So
love it.
yeah, so it's like chess, you bring your army of followers, and if you lose, then you become subject to the other guy. Subject just means you follow that teaching.
Doesn't
So
sound very hard chakra though.
yeah, well, yeah, politics goes everywhere.
Yeah, no, I've seen these videos of Tibetan monks, and then they're like hitting their hand.
Yeah, that's a scholastic technique done in debate, formal debate practice,
Hmm.
which is very useful. They Tibetan Buddhism is very much developed earlier Buddhism in idiosyncratic ways, in its own ways, and added some things that are very interesting and useful,
Hmm.
uh,
From the
among other things.
Bon religion.
Well, I don't think that debating came from Bun, but lots and lots of the whole thing about dakinis, nagas, and peaceful and wrathful deities, and all the ritual implements, and lots of that came from Bun for sure.
Hmm.
But the debate thing actually came from medieval Indian Buddhism,
Hmm.
like Buddhism of 500 AD or 1000 AD in India, where they were all very intellectual and they were very involved in debating each other by that time, which is not really a Theravadan practice. They're too busy sitting in the forest doing meditation rather than debating each other.
Hmm.
But it's a good way to develop knowledge and study and understanding of scripture.
Hmm. Let's get back to our topic a little bit here. And I was telling you or looking at the differences between Freud and Jung, and I know you haven't studied Freud in great detail, but maybe can you outline for us the differences between Freud and Jung, and how we, uh, in a sense, what was Freud more accurate to the law of one, or was Jung? What? Tell us a little bit about the dynamics and how you see Freud, Jung, and
Okay, well,
their
I'm
relations.
absolutely not expert on both of them,
Okay.
and less on Freud than Jung even. But I've read a bunch of Freud, of Jung, the books published by Bowling Press, Princeton University, big black hardcover books. And I mean, I think that Freud was more of an intellectual, and personally, I think both of them were kind of neurotic in the
Hmm.
beginning. And I think Freud handled it by cocaine or drugs and complicated theory and social life. And Jung handled it by mystic venturing inward and
Hmm.
art. So they both had their own personal challenges. And Freud was more of a mentalist guy who uh, had a theory of interpersonal or intrapsychic conflict. Intrapsychic meaning within the psyche of one person, there are implacable forces that conflict each other. So there's the id and the ego and the superego.
Mm-hmm.
And that triadic function, uh, in some ways, was taken from Judaism. So Freud was a very Jewish fellow, and Jung was, in a way, a Christian mystic,
Mm.
and also much more influenced by Eastern traditions, Jung. So the idea that you have three primary forces, uh, id, ego, superego, and then a very particular, almost mechanistic system of energy displacement and circulation in the mind. Meaning, if you're stuck on one issue, then there's an energy a blockage that doesn't allow other functions to develop, which is true. But he never really got out of the personal, Freud.
Sure.
And the superego, so those three forces, right, are uh, unreasoning, irrational, pre-conscious, instinctual drives and desires, id, and the mediator, ego, and then the other side being superego is like the law, the judge, the father aspect.
Mm.
And that, in many ways, is quite Jewish. And there's a book, I think, called Freud, no, I'm saying Moses and Monotheism, or Freud and Moses, but they were uh, it was Judaic in some ways.
Sure.
I'm not even sure how I could explain that, and I don't even think I understand it so well, but it said that, and from what I know, I would say so. But you see, in that kind of an anatomy, psychic anatomy, with three major forces only, there isn't a transpersonal, and there isn't a creative um, that's outside the box of conditioned mind experience.
Mm.
And Jung had a view of the archetypal mind, and is the founder of depth psychology or analytic psychology,
Mm.
which, and there's another guy named James Hillman who took that even further. The mind as a symbolic mandala, where, as the origin of gods and goddesses, and that mind, in some ways, uh, is an aspect of the macrocosm. And so Jung was very concerned with mandalas and alchemical symbolism and the alchemical transformation of ego to true self.
Wow.
So Jung was an alchemist. He was a Christian mystic, psychoanalytic alchemist. So Jung is a heavy guy. I like him a lot. He died around the time I was conceived, 61 or so. So, and I think Nityananda died 61. So those guys were influences on me as I was coming in.
Hmm.
They were coming up and I was going down. So
I heard that Freud viewed Jung as a psychotic.
yeah, maybe so. Well, I think he might have been psychotic sometimes, but Jung had some breakdowns, I believe, and Freud had some breakdowns. Both of them were kind of neurotic in some ways.
Yeah.
And but there's a famous quote from Jung, his biographer, or somebody in a film asked, "Dr. Jung, do you believe in God?" And Jung said, "No, I do not." And they said, "Dr. Jung, all your writing is so religious and metaphysical and mystical. How is it that you don't believe in God?" He said, "I do not believe in God. I know God. I know." And that's because he had transpersonal experience.
Hmm.
Now, a person who doesn't know what it is, that it can be, how it can be, why it can be, would say he's a psychotic.
Hmm.
So, and that's the way most people view mystics or spiritualists or New Agers. Some
Yes.
of them are silly anyway, but
Yes.
as people believing in fantasy. And that
Mm.
was the same line I took in my first book from elsewhere, talking about wanderers as seen by the psychological authority, or psychoanalytic, the psychological orthodoxy of today.
Mm.
uh, Easy to say. These are people who are choosing to believe they are ETs or from other planets or other something, um, to make themselves feel better or to avoid some psychological conflict in their mind,
Yeah.
or they're just insane. But that can be, but it can't be proven. And just because somebody believes it doesn't mean they're crazy, because the claim of the wanderer being that, this is real, I really am, and higher dimensions are real too, that cannot be proven also. So you can't prove that somebody believes it as a psychological need, and you can't prove that the person that it's actually not so.
Mm.
You can't, the scientist and orthodox psychologist, the academic, cannot prove that there are not higher dimensions and other worlds and all of that. They can't. So
Mm.
both of them can't prove their beliefs. Fine. So let's move on. And they usually, the skeptic usually can't move on, but the believer is happy to talk about many things. So,
Mm. There aren't that
so,
many. There aren't that many psychologists who will be so rational, though. It feels to me. You know what I mean?
Hmm? Yeah, well,
A lot of them would just throw you in the crazy bin.
yeah, well, those people are not really psychologically. Those people are not really fair. They're not really doing honest science.
Mm.
They're actually deceivers because they're unwilling to look at evidence,
Yes.
and they believe something that they're not admitting they cannot prove,
Mm.
just like the believer.
They're being unscientific.
Yes, it's unscientific or non-empirical or illogical. It's actually irrational
Yeah.
to be convinced and sure of something that you actually cannot prove. If you want to believe it, and if it may be so, of course, I believe in reincarnation, or I know reincarnation, but I can't prove it. Am I crazy? Maybe, maybe not. Is it real? Maybe so. So it may be real, and I believe it. I can't prove it, and I'm right. But somebody can say I'm crazy. Meanwhile, I can believe something else that is crazy, and I also can't prove that.
Mm.
So, so Ra said this is not a dimension of knowing. In fact, Ra said understanding is not of your density, and this is not a dimension of knowing, but rather one in which the development of acceptance is key. Acceptance without full knowing or understanding. That's the key, one key to the positive path. I don't understand why these terrible things happened, but I have some faith or knowing that it's part of a greater process.
Mm.
So in many ways, Freud is focused on the personal, and Jung is focused on the transpersonal. And they appeal to different people. Wanderers are more interested in Jung,
Mm.
and 3D intellectuals are more interested in Freud.
Mm. But you can really see that both are necessary, aren't they? It's almost like the lower and the higher self.
Well, Freud was a pioneer, and Freud broke open the world of the mind
Yeah.
uh, to conscious mind examination. I mean, Freud discovered the unconscious, you can say,
Mm.
or he threw open the doors to that, and that's a big deal.
Yeah.
And so he deserves huge credit for that. And that's necessary for people, who want to understand the self. And then what? Then what happens is that people who find that they're not in this implacable conflict in their mind, but they have some wellness in mind, and find limitations in Freud because he keeps returning to intrapsychic conflict, may discover that Jung touches them in a way that Freud cannot, appealing to their sense of higher possibility, greater possibility for self-transformation, or the greater creative mind.
And it seems very natural that Freud came first and then Jung, because if Jung throughout this whole thing about minds being joined, it wouldn't have been accepted. I don't know.
Well, I mean, if there wasn't a Freud,
there wouldn't be
there's,
right?
Yeah, there wouldn't have been much basis for Jung. Those who encountered Freud or Jung basically came through Freud in many ways. I mean, people who are moving towards Jung now understand what Freud's all about. But the people who support Freudian psychology didn't really go further. They're not interested in going further. For them, everything else is a fantasy.
Do you think this stuff comes through by benevolent ET influence?
I think benevolent ET influence is continual and ceaseless in the minds of those who seek to know in service to all. Meaning, anybody, everywhere, anytime, who's seeking truth, internal or external, or the truth of psychology and the truth of the universe, and particularly so that they can benefit others or bring some benefit to the world, are always in the field of benevolent ET mind offering. Always. It's basically that they're continually broadcasting on those frequencies.
Sure.
So and anybody who's thinking that way will pick it up, even though they don't know it, of course.
You can have as much as you want, basically, as long as you're ready for it.
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, knowledge is limitless, or wisdom is limitless, and the ocean, it's only the size of the container that is brought to the ocean that limits how much is taken. Nityananda said that. So, yeah, it's only us. We're the limiting factor as to the development of wisdom, or how much inspiration we can receive. And the limit is normally, self-conflict, the degree of self-conflict, which is the basis of self-preoccupation, or self-reference, self-absorption, self-centeredness, which is second chakra blockage.
Wow. That's actually really, from just in terms of a pedagogical perspective.
What does pedagogy mean? Actually, I've never really.
I'm assuming it's the science of learning, or let's look it up now. Pedagogy. I just used the term and I'm not sure what it was. The science and art of education.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, more or less. So my mindset just shifted there because I guess in education, where I went through the whole thing, right? I went through high school, A levels, university degree, further education in my career as a banker for a little bit, and the paradigm is always you get to a certain place and you're done, right? But now it's like the complete opposite. It's saying you can learn everything, but you have to be ready for it. I mean, it's just a bit mind-blowing.
Well, I guess you had more of a personally based sense of mind, of what mind is. I mean, mind is really limitless.
Yeah.
There's no limit to mind, and therefore its potentials are boundless too. The question is the degree to which we are receptive to our totality, which is, very much a chakra development issue.
Hmm. Hmm. So let's talk about. Mm, Maybe let's just talk about your counseling approach. I think that would be something interesting to look at as well, and how mm, when a client comes to you, how would you start with the counseling process, or is it more of a flowing thing? Do you have guidelines in mind? What do you look at first? Do you look at his relationship with his parents, or the things that he's coming at you with? How do you view? Do you have a template or a schema to look at the client?
I have no template or schema, other than what seems true and goodly in my understanding of personal mind and life process. Meaning, I would first I would first want to know, why are you talking to me today? What made you decide to have a talk with me? And they'll usually say that they have some curiosity about some issue, maybe, about being a wanderer, or some question, or they have some personal problem. And then the focus would be, what's the nature of the problem? How long has it been going on? How do you understand it? And uh, what do you think? What do you want? What do you hope, in terms of moving through it?
Hmm.
Where do you want to go? So it's very much relates to their conscious statement of need at the time. Meaning, I can see other things maybe that are a problem, but I'm not going to bring them up because I would rather follow their lead. So counseling is very much about following and following and leading again, and restating and reflecting and reframing so that the person can see it in a different way, and um, see how they're stuck, and see what they truly want, and consider their options.
Hmm.
They can make physical change in the situation or not. And then we might look at the karma of it when we go on further. So the emotional has to be dealt with, which is, if you're angry, feel your rage. If you're sorrowful, let yourself cry. If you're afraid, comfort yourself and feel safe, be safe, and allow the emotional flow. Then try to understand what it is and why, and the extent to which it's a realistic response or not. So if your loved one dies and you feel sad, I can't really say you have a problem because that's normal.
Hmm.
And then, so people say, oh, well, I'm so sad. I can't get over my sorrow. So there are a lot of people, and you can see their face is stuck in sorrow. The eyes and eyebrows have a certain look, and there could be certain lines developed on the face and the mouth also.
Hmm.
And so that's a person who couldn't get through their sorrow,
Hmm.
mainly because they didn't accept it adequately. They didn't allow their crying fully. They didn't uh, uh, accept their emotional response. They didn't then also accept the nature of what happened and understand how it happened.
Hmm.
And then there's also uh, the storyline that's created in the mind that fuels or renews, it replenishes the emotional process.
Wow.
So it's like, so my girlfriend left me and she's with another guy, and he's rich and successful, and she looks so happy with him. And then I imagine them having sex, and I feel this knife in my gut turning around.
Hmm.
And then I imagine what else she's doing with him that she used to do with me, and I'm turning the knife round and round. I'm eviscerating myself, and I feel this huge angst and sorrow and pain, and grief and rage and impotence. And then I keep thinking about it. And then my emotions continue around and around. And then, of course, I'll get sick. So there's a certain self-punishing by the repetition of what we already know. And it renews the emotional flow, or keeps it spinning, keeps the wheel of the emotional process spinning. And it's unnecessary, because the alternative to that is an unconditional acceptance, or an accepting of the reality, that has occurred. And then you just feel your pain, and you feel your pain, and you feel your pain, and then it lessens, or the sorrow decreases, and there's still a heart loss, but you're not turning the knife around. You're not torturing yourself by the repetition of unnecessary thought that ultimately comes from a deeper agenda or intention. Meaning, the reason that people repeat, the reason that people get stuck in certain emotional process is by self-renewal generated by the storyline they're creating. That storyline ultimately serves a deeper purpose, which is often self-punishment, as a response to the impotence of the loss and the fact that the person can't control what has occurred. And, there's a lashing out and a lashing in. So, in the end, actually...
Sorry, I didn't catch that. There's a lashing out and a lashing in? What does that mean?
Lashing out means, I'm screaming and hurting those around me. Lashing in is, I just phrased it.
Right, self-flagellation. Hey.
Hello. Hi.
Yeah. Okay, I lost you at self-flagellation.
Yeah, Skype was having an emotional catharsis. He said, "Ow, that hurts." Yeah, I do that too. So, I think that all emotional blockage, whether it's rage or sorrow or fear, is some form of self-punishment. Because the result is, darkened skies of mind. Sorrow, the result of all of that emotional stasis is ultimately pain and hurt my heart. And now I'm not talking about, when other people are involved. I'm talking about how we're thinking about it, and how that renews the spin of the emotional cycle, of the emotional process, keeps the flow and keeps the spin, and is ultimately self-punishing. Because the antidote to that is acceptance, across the board acceptance. Yeah, she left me. Yeah, she wants him and she don't want me. Yeah, he's better off than me in many ways. Yeah, she's giving her body to him and doing all of these powerful, heavy erotic things, not with me, with him, because she doesn't want me. Ooh, right? Now, that can be excruciatingly painful for one who has lost one's love. And, the father who lost a child, the woman who lost, her mother, anything, the guy who was fired, anything could be profoundly upsetting. And the nature of the thoughts, in many ways, are the dial which modulates the intensity of the pain associated with the thought. So the storyline, or what I'm thinking about it, ultimately dials up or dials down the pain associated with that emotional cycle. So if I want more pain, I can imagine, whatever. I can imagine, my beautiful child who's dead. I can imagine my beloved wife, partner who's having, great sex with another person. I can imagine the shame of everybody knowing I was fired. I can imagine, anything, and I can dial it up and dial it down according to my storyline. And that is the opposite of love. It's actually self-harming. Even though we can't imagine that's what we're doing. Meaning we just think it's a terrible loss, it's a terrible thing, whatever, therefore all my thought is justified. But it isn't, actually. I mean, again, it depends on the situation, right? There are realistic things and that are profoundly painful, and then there is the exacerbation of that pain by well-chosen storyline. Serves the agenda of self-punishment based in low self-value.
Actually, they're all self-reinforcing, aren't they? Like for example, you're talking about the guy whose girlfriend is seeing another man, and there must be a more general primal belief, which is something like I'm not good enough, that perpetuates the I'm not good enough for her.
Oh yeah, sure. Of course. I mean, the reason that others blame hurts is because it reinforces existing self-blame. And the reason that loss hurts more is because it reinforces or acts upon a pre-existing wounding or hurt from the history of loss.
Wow.
And
okay.
So
all of the previous losses,
yes,
adding up
are resonant with the current loss. And ultimately, every pattern of thought that serves to that is an outgrowth of the belief in low self-value strengthens it. And so there's a tape loop there.
Wow.
I believe I'm of low value, and so I interpret my life accordingly, which supports my belief, and my life proves it. But it's actually my interpretation that's self-proving.
So we really must be aware of even the small upsets, because the small upsets are just little holograms of the bigger ones, aren't they?
Yes. You can trace, you can trace back, or you can extrapolate from the small to the great. And so and that's what I would do in counseling too. Knowing that the degree of hurt now is somewhat related to the degree of hurt the person already carries, based on past experiences of similar loss like that, or just the whole passage from birth to the present moment, in which the person was invalidated or unrecognized for their value. So I mean, I look at parents with their children, and many many parents are in the mode of commanding and controlling, and the child's mind is completely unrecognized. Not only do they not ask them, how do you feel, what do you think, what do you want, or something, but they can't vibe with the child's mind, which is very soft and delicate and sweet and gentle and open and not knowing, but very lovely, delicate like a flower, right? If you crush it, it's dead, it's gone. It's awful if you squeeze the flower, But if you look at it or appreciate it with your heart, you can feel happiness. So, but from the young age, most people had parents who were too stuck in themselves to be really available to support the flowering of the child's mind. mind and heart. So, because of that, there's a history of being unrecognized or neglected. Psychic neglect. Psychic meaning of the whole psychology, of the whole mind and self process, feeling and thinking. So, most people were not, most people just weren't listened to well, consistently from a young age. And not being listened to well ultimately leads to self-blame. Because the child internalizes the rejecting process and self-rejects, or rejects aspects of its personal experience based on being rejected by the parent.
So it's saying, the child is saying, it must be my fault that mommy doesn't listen.
It must be because I'm bad.
It must be because I'm bad. Why? Why does that occur?
Because it hurts to be rejected or neglected. So the only way the child can make sense of the bad feeling is to attribute a badness to the self.
Wow. Shit.
The reason I have this bad feeling is because badness exists in me. It came from me. Or it's due to me.
Why isn't there possibility that it's nobody's fault?
First of all, there isn't a real dissociation or distinction in the child's mind between themselves and the parent, or between their sense of self and the different possibilities, or their emotional self, their emotional process, and some detached critical observation of it. They're not able to be, detached and critically observing their own emotional process. They're just in it.
Wow.
And they form beliefs. Core beliefs are formed by a kind of simple, very, very simplistic conceptualization of the emotion. So the mother neglects the child or doesn't listen and just commands. The child has an experience that's completely unreceived or unwelcome, actually, by the parent. That hurts. They feel alone, or they feel rejected. They feel unloved. They feel cold and uncared for and desolate, actually. And based on that feeling of desolation, actually, I mean, it's like, a baby hugging the mother experiences a completion and warmth. If you take the baby and pull him away, he'll feel cold and self-diminished, or a kind of cut in half even feeling,
Yeah.
There's not the sense of I am well in this body, but this body is not well separate from the mother's body. And so that unwellness is a kind of trauma, or a kind of hurt, or a kind of sorrow. And then there's the simple conceptualization of that into why, making sense of it, right? The mind does try to make sense of the experience, and ultimately only sees the self, or only feels me, and can't make distinction between what I am and what the mother is. And so I am my neglect. Therefore, I am neglected. I'm neglectable, and I'm one who ultimately ought to be neglected or made their own neglect. I am neglect.
Gosh.
And that leads to very deep level self-rejection, where the natural flow of emotionality is repressed. That's lower second chakra blockage.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. Can you make a distinction, or can you tell us a little bit more? What's the difference between a second and a third chakra blockage?
Well, again, second chakra is the emotional self-image. It's the water-based, very early mind, similar to a child or a youth,
Mm-hmm.
a teenager or a child, uh, that is pretty, is simply only self-referencing.
Mm-hmm.
There's only consciousness of me associated or identified with emotions and body and thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And the focus is totally inward, and also very unstable because it's emotionally based. Relates to kidney in Chinese medicine.
Mm.
And which is interesting. Kidney in Chinese medicine is the key to constitutional strength, the strength of one's body at a deep level. Kidney qi, kidney yin and yang,
Mm-hmm.
is the power, is sort of the power plant of the physical body.
Mm.
And uh, basic health very much depends on the conditions of the kidneys. And you can say that basic psychological health, which is the basis of any spiritual development, or whether or not it happens, the basis of the deep psychology is second chakra. Deep personal psychology is second chakra.
Mm.
And that's ultimately core beliefs about self.
Right. I'm not good enough. I'm kind of
I'm
thing.
not, yeah, there are many.
Yeah.
I mean, any self-evaluation is ultimately a second chakra affair at the beginning, until
Okay.
higher centers are developed.
Right.
And third center is fire and air and intellect, fire, air, but more associated with the group and social life. And so there's an expansion beyond the personal body mind to other relationship and group. And it's more associated with thinking than feeling.
Mm.
Uh, it's associated with comparison
Mm.
and evaluation, because ultimately that third chakra is the platform for polarization, choice of positive or negative path, which is development of higher centers, 4, 5, 6. So humanity is a third density group that,
Mm.
and thus most people are working from third chakra, and nationalism or any group identification, loyalty, self-image associated with group identity is third chakra issue.
Right.
And there are two normal ways of third chakra blockage, simplistic view. One is concave and one is convex. These are two blockages. Concave is sort of like collapsed and pushed in, like a cave. And that's the person who doesn't care about society, or is psychopathic, sociopathic, or tries to dominate and control others. I'm sorry, we moved. The concave is the one who avoids and doesn't like society, but actually can't function well in it.
Is that the victim?
Yeah, there's a lot of fear. They don't have their strength.
Mm.
They're collapsed. They have a sort of collapse of will in the
Mm.
social arena.
Mm.
Then the other side is the dominator. That's convex.
Right.
And that ultimately will be a person who moves service to self.
The
If
Hitlers
they
of the world.
what? What's that?
The Hitlers of the world. The Hitlers and
Yeah,
Mussolini's.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So service to self path, negative type people
Mm.
are dominators, social dominators. And so that domination, of course, is based on second chakra blockage too, which means
Ah.
at core level they're not too happy with themselves also, but it's heavily covered and distortion is their path rather than release of distortion. Their goal is to become completely separate from all that is, while the positive goal is to become completely all that is.
Wow. It makes a lot of sense now to me. I think I was hearing a lot, but I never put it together. Now I just
Put what together?
putting the concrete, or what I've observed in my empirical observations with my intellectual understanding of the chakra system and what a blockage actually means. We were talking about a block, right? And it made so much sense to me just now, because it's this unwillingness to face it, and it's almost like you're denying it, and so you're putting it aside, and you're not flushing that shit. It's like the toilet bowl is stuck, and the more it's stuck, the more stuck it becomes.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, when we're stuck, it's because we're afraid of becoming unstuck. Because the basis of blockage is actually grasping. Some non-love based grasping. So the person who's stuck in sorrow is grasping the unrighteousness of the loss. The person who's stuck in anger is grasping the unrighteousness of the power relation, or of the interaction, supposed injustice, or maybe real injustice. So and the person who's stuck in fear is grasping the shock, the authentic shock, and is actually afraid of not being in shock or hypervigilance. If I'm vulnerable, I'll be hurt again, so I have to stay stuck in this, paralyzed in fear. If I'm frozen in fear, I won't be soft to be hurt. I'm hardened in fear. Just like I'm hardened in anger, so I won't be hurt again, or I can protect myself. So, I mean, fear and anger are in some ways both hardenings, while sorrow is a dissolving. And that's in many ways, I'd say that I would often consider anger more of a third chakra blockage, and sorrow and fear two forms of second chakra blockage. And so, and it's true, the element of third chakra is fire, like anger. Yeah. The element of second chakra is water, and so sorrow is hot water, warm water, and fear is cold water or ice. And therefore, fear is a lower subplane blockage of second chakra than sorrow. But almost always under anger is sorrow. Almost always.
So the vast majority of human problems are really second and third chakra blockages.
Yes, almost all. And the ones that are not are traceable back to second and third chakra blockage. So yes, the whole problem of this planet is second, third chakra blockage.
That's really profound, actually.
Yes, it's a simplification that explains a lot.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's basically dirty water and destructive fire.
Dirty water and destructive fire.
You can that could be a book, a book title.
This is really profound, Scott. I'm really learning a lot from this particular podcast.
Good. Well, it's nice that we kind of let it flow, the dialogue, rather than fixed, focused section of ideas.
And what about denied sexuality? That second chakra, right? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, sexuality is considered first chakra, but the blockage is applied at the second, or the blocking process begins at second. First chakra is red ray, red color, earth element, square, and the source of sexuality, actually. So the power comes through the first. But the degree to which it's blocked begins in second. And what's interesting is that all, again, there's a concave and a convex. So sexual repression and sexual acting out or sexual excess, whatever that may be,
Mm.
are both forms of sexual blockage, which are sourced in second chakra blockage, but not only. There's third chakra blockage too involved in sexuality. Uh, the interesting association is that second chakra being the emotional self-definition or emotionally based self-image and core self-belief is the primary matter about determining sexual health.
Mm.
How you feel about yourself is the arbiter of your sexual health. You'll never hear that anywhere else. And that's because the flow of red ray energy up through the centers from the first into the second is ultimately hitting upon blockage or non-blockage of second chakra associated with core beliefs of self, personal self. So
When you say arbiter, you mean controller.
what's that?
What does arbiter mean?
Oh, arbiter. Arbiter is like determiner.
Determiner. Okay.
Yeah, so the primary determinant of how much sexual red ray energy comes up the spine, upward spiraling light from root chakra coming on up. The first choke point, or bamboo section, is second chakra. And the degree to which that comes in is at a deep level associated to how I feel about me, how I think and feel about me. And, there are a million examples. So if I hate myself, I turn off my sexuality. If I hate myself, I over-exaggerate my sexuality. If I'm well with myself, then I follow my natural feeling. If I have low self-value, then I control sexuality. If I want to be a good child of my parents and follow their religion and they told me that sex is bad, then I'm bad. If I allow my feelings, so I don't allow my feelings, so I feel that I'm good in their eyes. Dot, dot, dot. So, including sexual excess, I'm a great super stud, so I'll have sex all over the place. Or I'm needy, so I'll have a lot of sex. Or I'm angry at women, so I'll get into S&M. And that's because my mommy hurt me when I was young. That's actually where those guys are coming from. So, whatever. How the person thinks of themselves deeply is the first determinant of their sexuality. And ultimately, the question is, does it get to love or not? Is the energy significantly or not significantly baffled and blocked by second and third ray blockage, second, third chakra or ray blockage, or not? How far up do we go? And the turning point in sexuality between negative sexuality and unconscious sexuality and body-only sexuality, which is like, fucking for fun. Which is fine, but the question is there love or not? It may or may not have kind heart in there, good heart there.
Yeah.
But the question of the dividing line between lower and higher, if we want to use a simple word, or materialistic versus spiritualized sexuality, is whether the energy gets into fourth ray or not. Meaning, what's the moral basis of this sexual engagement? Is it me dominating and Ra, or being dominated? Ra said there were 4 qualities in sexuality that create a drop down from green ray, fourth ray, into lower chakra blockage. Or 4 qualities of mind that create the lower chakra, second, third ray blockage, that keep the energy from going on into heart. They were the desire to possess, and the desire to be possessed, and the fear of possession and the fear of possessing the other. So both, one is a desire, two associated with desire, two associated with fear, all associated with possession or control or domination. Both the desire to dominate and the fear of being dominated, and the desire to be dominated and the fear of dominating are all manifestations of second, third-rate blockage. Or those thoughts create second, third-rate blockage. Second, third-rate blockage creates those thoughts, those desires or fears. So that's very interesting. So it's a question of, is the sexual engagement is it a win-win or a win-lose? Yeah, are we here as equals, or fundamentally not? Playing. I mean, I think there's always some aggression in sexuality. I mean, if it's the same hormones, right? Testosterone and androgen and all those excited guys. So aggression and sexuality for the male are very similar, and that's how it should be, actually. Meaning, that's the body's. Those are some of the rules of the mechanism. But that doesn't have to. That can be with love. That can be with.
Hello. Hey, Scott.
Hi. Is that on your end, do you think?
I think so. I think I'm being cut off intermittently, but...
Do you have any enemies? Enemies at Goldman Sachs?
I hope not. Jesus Christ.
All right.
It's the black helicopters. Go away.
Yeah, any black helicopters coming overhead, that'll definitely be related. Don't, you can laugh, but of course those things do happen. So they may not be happening now, but yes.
At least I'm doing something right if they're coming.
That's right. You can measure a man by the strength of his enemies. So the man with strong enemies is a man of greater valor and virtue, if the enemies are evil ones.
Yes. I wanted to ask, so BDSM, yeah?
Yes. Yes.
Is
right. So BDSM is true second and third chakra blockage.
Right.
It's the essence of the negative path, actually, which is these blockages are good. These blockages are me and my foundation. So there's no desire to move into love. And so true BDSM is basically, Rob talked about this, the pleasure of domination and the pleasure of being dominated. Pleasure in the sense that they both feel they're both involved in developing themselves on a negative path. That's the true negative sexuality. One is a master plunderer, and the other one is the taken and used, and that's just the way it is. And both of them somehow develop on the negative path thereby. And so then of course there is, a love-based or honesty-based exploring of power imbalance, domination, submission, top and bottom. That's not the same as negative sexuality. It's not that everybody doing anything like that is negative on the negative path. But those in the negative path do that exclusively.
Interesting. So you're saying... So you're saying... Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
So you're saying that BDSM can be used by healthy individuals to explore this dynamic?
Okay, let's not pigeonhole him. No, I'm not saying that. I am not saying that. What I'm saying is that uh, I believe some people are in that community who are not negative, and they are trying to work out sexual blockages, lower second chakra blockages associated with power imbalance and sexuality.
Mm.
And their intention is not to go negative. Their intention is to heal,
Mm.
but they may not be able to. They may or may not. So
So they have to go
it,
through it.
it's a it's a matter of each person who finds something attractive or exciting about that to come clean with it and admit it and acknowledge it and try to know what that's all about and uh, and really ultimately revalue their sexuality
Mm.
because I mean you got to be clear on your path. It's not about being good or bad. It's really about being clear and continuing on that clear path. So the person who likes domination would have to acknowledge what that's all about and whether they really like inflicting harm or not. And the person who likes submission would have to acknowledge that they get turned on by that, but do they really want to be abused or not?
Mm.
And if they do, I mean, I can see she's a wanderer, but she really likes to be slapped, or she really likes to be in the sexual use thing.
Mm-hmm.
Then, in the end, the person on the positive path can't participate with that
Mm.
because I don't want to be an abuser, actually.
Yeah.
Even so that's where the each person on both sides has to evaluate exactly what they want, and uh, it's very hard. It would not normally happen that a person would say, "Yes, I really want to be abused, and I know that's good for me." If they're not mind controlled, normally people won't think that way.
Mm.
On the negative path, they're just upside down anyway, and they don't really want love. So they can be comfortable in the role of an abuser, and then they're just on the negative path. And anybody who's positive should stay away. So, but in those communities, there are people who are truly negative, and there are people who are not quite negative, and there are people who are very positive, who are trying to get free of sexual blockage from past lives.
Sure.
I mean, I'm not like in those communities or anything, but I've seen it online. And some people are idiots who are just playing a role play game, and some people are really negative. And some people actually look like they're big heart. Some women could look like they have a really sweet heart,
Mm.
um, but they're still self-punishing. The dominator usually is the one who goes negative. The one who's the M side usually, sometimes is a very kind person who did harm in past lives. So they feel they have karmic guilt. The submissive often has karmic guilt, and they have a deep knowing they cannot articulate that they abused others before, and they don't want that.
Hmm.
So the question for them, the issue for the submissive is really about self-forgiveness. And when they really, really forgive themselves, they would no longer be party to abuse. They may enjoy a sort of power differential, but they won't be involved with abuse or true self-harming.
And the same could be said for the dominator. Is that his part of his mercy,
Yes,
which is
yes,
forgiveness
I
as
think.
well.
Yeah, well, the dominator would have to realize they don't really want to inflict harm. That there's something exciting, but there's also a sense that if you're in pain, I'm in pain too. I cringe.
Mm.
I don't feel happy. I cringe when you're in pain. And therefore I don't want to make it. And therefore, I'm not going to go there. And yet, you know, a male lion pounces on the lioness, right? He looks kind of randy and, was really strong guy. So there is some kind of top-bottom thing there, but it's not like, I want to torture you or I want to destroy your mind. So
True.
the negative has to be really negative,
True.
and the positive should ultimately drop the negative fascinations by looking more deeply into what's really best for them, what feels best, actually.
Mhm.
It's not just theoretical. It's really certain things don't feel good, and other ways feel right when heart mind is open.
Hmm. It's good
And
that we.
that person has to follow. They have to go to a deeper level of listening in the mind to find the center point there.
Hmm. It's good that we're talking about this because, especially when it comes to so-called deviant sexual behavior, there's a lot of stigma associated with that, and it's just talking about in this instance BDSM. We are almost like, you know, it looks to me like it's neutral. It's just something that happens, and we shouldn't put people in a bucket, as we say. There are all there different levels of experience within this community, and we shouldn't just relegate this thing to the lower or something to be.
Well, yeah, it all depends on. I mean, it's everything depends on the individual and how they're doing what they're doing, of
Yeah.
course. And there's a spectrum. But any group, culture group like that, itself has its own determined spectrum within the whole range of consciousness. And you see, the question really is what range or spectrum are we talking about? We're really talking about a moral spectrum.
Hmm.
That's the key evaluator for a human life is moral development. It doesn't mean being, church ordinary oriented or religious or dogmatic or rules or anything. It's a matter of which side of the fence are you on? Are you on virtue or are you on vice? You
Hmm.
know, do you do you enjoy when everyone is well, or do you enjoy when only you're well and others are not well? Do you enjoy that? And so that's the distinction of positive or negative path. So in that community, just like in any ashram too, there are people who are really saintly. There are people who are really very well and big-hearted and good and developed, and there are some who are really evil and black negative. Meaning.
Hmm.
Um, however, within any culture community like that, subculture group, it has its own portion of the overall moral spectrum. Meaning, a person who's really well doesn't need too many props to their life.
Yeah.
Just like a great guru has a loincloth and nothing else, or a begging bowl and a robe, you know, there is disinterest in the accoutrements of personality. And so the whole thing is, you're not going to find many Buddhas dressing up in leather. You can bank that line,
Oh.
right? It just doesn't happen that way. They're just not interested. They just won't put their arms in the sleeve. Okay, they just don't care. So
Sure.
they're just not going to do the fitting. So they're not even going to be, part of that. It's unfitting and unfittable, and so you won't find them
Yeah.
garbed that way.
It's hard to do
Meaning
meditation
that
in
they're
it.
not going to, meaning that a person at certain levels of moral or spiritual development won't necessarily be involved in all the things in global human society, right? Like again, you're not going to find many adepts at, cockfighting in the Philippines. Chicken, rooster.
Yeah.
You know, you're not going to. They wouldn't go there normally. Meaning, on the lower astral plane, you find demented thought forms. Normally, that they're native to that level, and so in any group, it has a certain range of placement.
Yeah.
Depending on what's the group all about.
Yeah.
So, I mean, people should, do your own thing. Just don't hurt people. And if you want to hurt people, be prepared for the consequences of going on that path.
Yeah. It's interesting to what we're talking about, pornography, right? I mean, there are so few depictions of fourth chakra sex in our society.
Very true. That's right.
It's so few.
There used to be, in the 70s and 80s, there was the rare romantic movie that showed some sexuality. But they were considered boring, because nobody watches a sexual movie to look at the storyline normally.
Yeah.
Or the focus has become so material, so body-oriented, or exclusively body. And then it becomes more and more perverse, actually, or dominating type. It's more and more negative sexuality portrayed. So, and Ra commented on that too. Ra was saying in the general accounting of Earth human sexuality, in which fourth chakra is generally blocked, they said, the service to others aspect of sexuality is unrecognized. Now that means that not only service to others is positive path with love, but it also means that sexuality as a form of service to other is almost unheard of and unrecognized. And meaning sexuality shared between two people who care as a form of helping the other, helping each other, not by legal decree or religious decree or any decree, but by simple desire that the other be well and happy. But it's not a good pickup line to say, I'd like to offer my body to you to have sex tonight, if you would like that.
Damn.
Oh, well. I heard, once upon a time, I think in high school somewhere, that some guy, he only wanted physical sex, and so he would go to a bar and just ask every woman, I like you, do you want to come home and we'll have sex? And most of the time he got slapped or screamed at. But every time, 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 20, somebody said, okay. And he was always successful in that way. So...
Yeah, it's a matter of percentages, isn't it? Statistics.
Right. He was willing to put up with 90% rejection and, angry return.
Yeah.
So, but I think, human sexuality is very, very distorted, as we all know. And that is not coincidental to lower second chakra blockage or targeting of lower second chakra.
Yeah, I was just about to go there, actually.
Because, in a sense, the degree to which one's own native sexuality is uncontrolled, meaning natural, not forced up or down, allowed as it is, and everybody's different. To the extent that that is occurring, that natural allowance, the sense of self is good. It's not a matter of too much or too little, actually, and it's done in a spirit of self-appreciation or self-well-being, natural sexuality. And then the converse is, to the extent that everybody is distorted one way or another, up or down, too much, too little, or too hard, too soft, or too dominating, or too repressed, or too complicated. People have a damaged sense of self and low self-value, or some kind of distortion or blockage in the sense of self-value. It doesn't mean, sex is the key to good sense of self. Not at all. But a good sense of self certainly is not compatible with sexual distortion or sexual blockage of any type.
Well, what about monks?
They have personal distortion too. They have often, some of them are self-punishing and self-repressive. Absolutely. Lots of monks are self-repressive. Lots. Especially, historically. Lots of monks stop the behavior, and they may even be able to stop the thought, but they don't stop the desire. And a lot of monks are not healthy. Lots of monks die at 60 years old. And they haven't had first level enlightenment either.
We were talking about, we were joking about sex as a service, but I read this article about men and women who provide sexual services to disabled people. Like obviously, if you're if you had been in a wheelchair for like years and years, or you have one leg missing, like you're not gonna find sex easily. So there are these people that I don't know what they call, surrogate something, sex therapists or something, who provide this service, and it's pretty amazing actually.
Yes, it is called surrogate therapy.
Yeah, okay, surrogate therapy, yeah.
Which is a very clean name for something that's very easily abused or, taken into the negative way. But there is a certain class of therapists who will participate in, sexual activity with a client or with a spouse of a client, or in the family of the couple. They'll be part of that, whether the person is disabled or not. So it's like sex teacher for hire, sex healer for hire.
Sure.
And I've heard of that too. I can't imagine they publicize themselves too much.
Yeah, I do know one gentleman here in London, actually. He's one of the better known sex therapists.
Yeah?
I was actually thinking of interviewing him. In fact, he agreed to an interview, but we haven't done it yet. Just scheduling.
That's it. Well, that's a very interesting thing. The problem for them would be, even if they are very sincere and positive and they really are respectful and, really positive. I guess that's possible, of course. Still, they could get a lot of trouble with clients who are unstable.
Sure.
Or legal issues. Or the family, the relations of that person. So it's a very thorny matter, I think. It's very easy to have trouble there. But I think in the future, in fourth density, sexuality will be, there won't be the same kind of moral complication, because everybody's positive. So nobody would force anything.
Yay!
Yeah, well, I think fourth density would be, for a time, a free love situation.
Like the hippies.
Like the hippies tried to be. I don't think they got that. I don't think they were successful. But like the ideal of free love commune or something. It's very possible, but almost nobody is mature enough to do it.
Yeah.
So almost always those communities collapsed or exploded. So, but it's possible. It's just there's so much. People are so psychologically wounded and complicated. There's so much blame, and then is negative sexuality occurring. So
Sure.
that's a problem.
Scott, it's been such a wonderful conversation. Do you have any last things you'd like to mention on our overall topic, which is obviously in psychology and Freud, Jung, therapy, counseling?
Well, just the key to lower second chakra clearing of blockage is a very warm self-caring. When you're angry, be angry. When you're sad, be sad. Don't block your natural feeling. But that has nothing to do with acting out or acting with others. We're just talking about the internal flow of thought and feeling. Be kind to your internal process,
Mm.
and uh, that's the key to making peace with one's own mind. And it really does require some willingness to sit through the pain of one's hurt
Mm.
without making a complicated storyline or any kind of self-punishing involved in there, which is the challenge.
Mm.
And to the extent that people feel not happy with themselves, they need to cop to that, but also understand that's not the end of the line. And even if I feel terrible about myself, that doesn't mean I'm terrible. It just means I feel bad about myself or don't like myself or something.
Mm.
And so that has to be detached from, like, I have these thoughts of myself, I have these beliefs about me that are harmful or painful, and they're limiting, and they're not with love,
Mm.
not self-accepting,
Mm.
and they also may not be right. So and then there's a willingness to suffer that. And then if you suffer that, you'd ultimately activate the conscience, the soul in the heart, which says, well, don't hurt yourself. Don't you want, let's be nice to myself here. And then healing will take root and develop more strongly.
Mm.
So all these problems of interpersonal relations are ultimately in a sense of self, in each person's sense of themselves, beliefs about self. And so the path is one of simplification, paying attention to the detail to resolve complexity.
Mm. And I would further add that I think meditation is the method par excellence to get that
Yes,
detachment.
very much so. Yeah. In meditation, you can realize I am not this mind,
Mm.
and then have a greater appreciation of the self as the presence for pure awareness. And then also, as you say, have detachment and see the process of thought and feeling, and consider, is it loving or unloving? Do I, so you have to love your pain and love or accept your false limiting beliefs about self that
Mm.
are self-unloving.
Mm.
And all of that develops love wisdom. And that's fourth, fifth center development, which naturally clears 1 and 2, or 2 and 3.
Mm. Scott,
So,
thank you so much.
yeah, thank you too.
Um,
2 weeks from today?
e- wait, hold on. Let's just finish the show. Because the listeners, because I never know how to end these things. It's like the transition goes so fast. But to our listeners, if we hope you've enjoyed this conversation. If you have any comments, feel free to contact Scott or myself, or leave a comment on this on the YouTube page. So Scott and Ken, wishing you a great sex life. Bye for now. Hello, everybody. It's Kenneth from Global Renaissance, and on the line I have Scott Mandelker for our regular Scott Mandelker series. We are number 7, I do believe.
Yes.
And from our last kind of show, our last kind of discussion, Scott, we were talking about Freud and Jung,
Mm,
and some of the psychoanalytical uh, mm, aspects that relate to what we've been discussing so far. Obviously the development of the self, or the human being
mm,
into something trans, as we're saying in that language, transpersonal.
right.
Mm. And I was asking you, so maybe let's just start the show with talking about your background, and what you, because I do believe you have a degree in counseling.
Yeah, I have my BA is in Buddhist Studies and Psychology from
Mm.
Naropa Institute, Boulder, Colorado, 1987. Yeah, 87. That school was started by a Tibetan Lama, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, who died. And actually, he died while I was a student there, and so I remember the day very well. And it's basically uh, Buddhism, psychology, and Tibetan Vajrayana and art
Wow.
blended. So very creative and interesting.
Hmm.
So then I have a master's in counseling, psychology, integral counseling, and PhD from CIIS,
Hmm.
California Institute of Integral Studies, San Francisco, in the late 80s and early 90s. So yeah, I have a lot of training,
What
but
is
it's not a university psychology program. It was all quite transpersonal
hmm.
uh, and integrative.
What does integral counseling mean?
Well, that's a term that CIIS uses um, in their own way. So California Institute of Integral Studies. Integral actually traces back to the founder of CIIS, Mr. or Dr. Chaudhary, Indian man, who was a student of Sri Aurobindo, Indian sage or guru or teacher, writer. And I guess it's basically, typical integration of the mind body psychology, somatic psychology process,
Hmm.
and the higher potentials of a human being and spiritual questions, spiritual issues.
Hmm. Sounds very Ken Wilber almost.
Oh, yeah, sure. So we studied transpersonal psychology, and there was a contingent at the school that, were like devotees of Ken Wilber,
Hmm.
meaning they thought he was the cat's meow upon the influence of mind, you know. Do you know about that work?
Yeah, it's really fascinating.
Yeah,
I've
he's
looked at
for
the
real.
picture. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, he's very much a good guy, and that group has also had some attack or some criticism from the mainstream science in Japan, which means they must be on the right track.
Hmm.
So that's interesting because it shows how states of mind influence the building block of matter, which is water,
Hmm.
actually, hydrogen and oxygen,
Hmm.
carbon-based system. So that molecules can be rearranged by mind is a big deal, and that's how magic is done, and that's how healing is done.
Hmm.
So, so that's one example. Another example of transpersonal aspect of our being. And then, I mean, I do counseling. So I've been doing counseling since 91, and it's transpersonal, more or less, not only for wanderers or metaphysics, but that's all included. So it wouldn't be only let's talk about your feelings towards your parents and how that manifests in your patterns of relationship today and your sense of self or self-esteem and therefore your health. Not only that, but let's consider why you chose your parents, or
Hmm.
what do they manifest, what aspects of your unrecognized conscious do they manifest,
Hmm.
or um, what did you experience in meditation and why was that? What does it mean for you to have an experience where you had deja vu or vision of the future or prophetic dream or some kind of bliss in meditation
Hmm.
or something, something unusual. And then how that relates to ultimately the higher levels of personal development. similar to Maslow, Abraham Maslow's scale of self-realization. Forget the name.
Hierarchy of needs.
Yeah, hierarchy of needs. So, you know, that very much accords with the chakra development from 1 to 7, from the
Yes.
base of the spine.
Mm.
And Ra actually brought that up in saying that that we can understand ourselves better by analyzing our habitual seating of experience, seating, S-C-A-T, how experience settles in us, how we settle experience in our mind, meaning through one of the 7 perspectives, or really a few of the 7 chakra perspectives. So in the first chakra, the concern is only survival for transpersonal psychology.
So give us a little definition there. What is transpersonal psychology?
Well, the question is, what is personal, right? So in Greek, the word persona, I believe, means mask, like a theater mask. So the person is a mask. The person is metaphysically mind-body-spirit complex, 3 energy fields with many subdivisions, 7 chakras with subplanes and energy connections. A field of energy consciousness that has continuity of sense of self and patterns of mind. So that's the self, the manifest self, more or less. Personal then focuses on mind-body, actually, which is the 5 senses and intellect, the veiled mind, or the conscious mind, and body. And so personal is on developmental issues primarily, relation of the child to parents, and the stages of normative psychophysical development from infancy onwards, and major developmental tasks, and how well they've been met or not met, and how that leads to psychological conflict or unhealth, neurotic, psychotic patterns of mind. Now that's all. The transpersonal then basically gets into questions of our greater self, which is not only this one lifetime, or not only body-mind. And it's obviously invisible, unprovable, non-empirical, non-scientific, in a sense, scientifically determinable.
But by today's technology.
Right, except, there are pioneers, many. So we have Kirlian photography. Where you can see what appears to be auras or energy patterns interpenetrating physical form, like leaves, things like that. You have Dr. Emoto, Japanese man who I met, who's a very nice guy, in Tokyo, who takes, high magnification photographs of water crystals after certain influence. Not only water in the reservoir and water in the sacred lake, but also water that you say love to and water that you cry at or scream on. And checking to see the geometry, the quality of crystalline symmetry, the basically geometrics of the water molecule. Survival, food, shelter, sex, body activity, health, life or death of the body, not much thinking, and lots of body focus. In the second chakra, the concern is my feeling about me and how it relates to me and my personal emotional process in the moment. In the third chakra, there's a relation to other and group, society, and the bringing in of the intellect. So there's an expansion from the second chakra to inclusive awareness of others. And third chakra relates to third density, which is the place where souls make their choice of polarity, whether you're going to go with love or without love as the guiding principle of your life, and how you meet experience or how you meet the catalyst of life and develop yourself, whether you embrace love and truth and goodness for all, or you're seeking power and control for the separate self at any cost, and truth and kindness are unimportant. So that's where choice is made through density, and third chakra consciousness is very group and social related. And so that can be healthy or unhealthy, right? So some people are involved to help the world, some people are involved to control people and groups. Some people are very concerned about what other people are doing or not doing, very concerned about society, and then others are not. So there's a saying: the common the low level a low mind a low level mind is concerned with things. A middle level mind is concerned with people. A high level mind is concerned with ideas. And so once we get to the high level mind concerned with ideas, then we get to the higher chakra perspectives on meeting catalyst or meeting experience, how the seeding of experience in a awakened mind, where the concern is not only me and my feeling, or the group and my position, and my action in the group, but also a deeper understanding of my being here and greater significance. So in fourth chakra, the concern is care and kindness to all, self included. In the fifth chakra, the perspective is seeking understanding and truth and knowing and communication and creative interaction in a positive way, or negative, actually. And then sixth chakra is awareness of unity, or how we all are interrelated and dancing together, and the value of balance and will, and interdimensional awareness, actually. And then seven is, bliss enlightenment. So usually we focus at one or other level. And so the example Ra gave was somebody's at the checkout counter, or somebody's in the store in front of you, and they're delayed. One person curses them. The other person feels sorry for them because it looks like they can't find their change. The other person doesn't care at all, and another person feels well, regardless. So
because we're fixated on a certain level of thinking. Is that what?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So the one who's angry is blocked second, third chakra. The one who's compassionate is developed in the fourth, or heart center. The one who's indifferent is generally fixed in the second center, because they're self-concerned and not interested in others' condition. And then the one who's well, may well be in a state of poise or balance in higher centers, 654. So that's transpersonal. And so in the healing process or self-development process, you can go top-down and bottom-up. Those are two different approaches. So meditation is top-down, and psychology, especially even a body therapy, is bottom-up, right? You can see through it, or you can see it through.
You can see what? Sorry, I didn't catch the first one.
Yeah, you can see through it. If you can't see through it, you've got to see it through. This was a statement from my counseling supervisor at CIIS 20 years ago, a guy named Ray Vespi, V-E-S-P.
Wow.
Really good soul.
Wow, and that's profound, man.
Yes, that's a very high transpersonal awareness.
Yeah.
So if you can't see that your mind is like a dream, or thoughts and feelings are like, clouds that appear and dissolve, and thereby be detached and return to balance and open heart. If you can't do that now, then you have to see it through by understanding and accepting and dealing with the complexities of mind.
Wow. Actually, just to backtrack a little bit, I was watching a film with a bunch of friends, watching Conversations with God, actually, and this movie was about Neil Donald Walsh, and he was he was going through many scenes he was a homeless man, and he was eating food from a rubbish dump,
Mm.
and a boy and a woman were watching him, and just it was so interesting to see